Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're bringing down the Wednesday, December 27th slate of college football bowl games for DFS purposes on DraftKings and FanDuel. We've got a nice little four-game slate going on today, which means that we're going to have a decent amount of options to choose from, better than the Tuesday slate where it was three games. This slate actually has four decently appealing games with seven decently appealing quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of options to fill out our lineups. And as with bowl season, as we've seen so far, the transfer portal and the opt-outs are, kind of going crazy right now in college football, but there's not as much of that to parse through today as there is, or as there has been for some other days. So I'm going to make sure to hear breakdown on this video what we know about what's happening with the transfer portal and the opt-outs for these games, as well as what is speculation, because, there's still a lot of drama happening right up until kickoff. If you were following the Kansas UNLV game today and seeing just the point spread movement and people expecting that Jason Bean and Devin Neal were going to be out of that game, and they both ended up playing. So, just with bowl games, always use caution, always do your research, but I'm going to be making sure that I get to you guys here in this video what is known and what is speculation about who's in the portal, who's not, who's playing, who's not, for all four of these games. We're going to break it down the same way we did yesterday's show. We're going to kind of go game by game, so that way you can kind of get a full picture of each game. And if you're playing Showdown DFS, hopefully that'll help you out as well. And it would kind of just be a way to kind of organize the thoughts a little bit more so than if we went, position by position. So that's what we got for today's episode, y'all. And we will be back for the rest of bowl season. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, as well as subscribe to the audio feed as well. So that way you can be notified when new episodes drop, because we're going to be here for the rest of bowl season for college football, and then just picking back up next week with all of our college basketball content and NFL content and some big announcements with some golf content as well. So if you're interested in any of those, make sure you subscribe so that way you can be notified when those drops, because we got a lot of new viewers for bowl season, y'all. So I'm hoping that you guys can like what you see here on these bowl episodes, and then join us for some college basketball, NFL, and golf content as well. All right, so let's go ahead and kick things off by talking about the first game of the day, the Military Bowl. All right, so game one of the day is going to be the Military Bowl, taking place between Virginia Tech and Tulane. And I'm not going to lie, this game is kind of like the opposite of what I would have expected from this game if it were played a month ago. I think what you're going to see with these four games here on Wednesday is there is not a whole lot of opt-out and a game time decision and declaring for the draft drama in terms of who's playing and who's not. But the question you're going to have to ask yourself is who wants to be here and who wants to win this bowl game? Because I think there's a lot of teams in this four-game slate that had disappointing seasons, that are without key players and without key coaches, and they're going to be having to show up and get motivated to play this game. And I think that the motivation factor is going to be a little bit of a difference in some of these games, but that's something that's really hard to kind of statistically measure and figure out as well. So I'm not saying you can just totally rely on that, but I think that is something that is going to be a factor when you're picking your lineups for these games. Anyway, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but here's what I mean by all that. I think Tulane objectively was a better football team than Virginia Tech this season, but Tulane is without their head coach as well as their starting quarterback and all three of their starting wide receivers. And so this game is currently a 10-point spread for Virginia Tech, 10.5-point spread actually, with a total of 44.5, meaning that the implied total is about 27-17 in favor of Virginia Tech. I never do partial points with the implied totals because teams can't go out there and actually score a partial point. So 27-17 about is the projected total. And with Tulane, they're missing a lot. They're missing their quarterback, Michael Pratt. They're missing their three starting wide receivers, as well as their head coach, Willie Fritz. I don't think this Tulane team really wants to be there. At the quarterback position, they have two guys who are apparently going to split snaps, one of which is Kai Horton, who was the backup throughout the season. He started 2 games in place of Michael Pratt and was just kind of okay in those 2 games. But he's actually in the portal. So I don't know how invested the team will be in playing him. Justin Ibieta is the other guy that will be playing snaps. And with them apparently splitting snaps, I don't think either are playable in DFS, in my opinion, and I will be avoiding that situation. Kyron Drones is the quarterback for Virginia Tech, though, and I do really like him. He is one of my favorite cost-adjusted quarterbacks on the slate. I think he's got a very reasonable price tag, and he's got a high ceiling. He is a dual threat, meaning he can get you a lot of fantasy points with his legs. He's gotten the 100-yard rushing bonus once this season. He averages about 10 rushing attempts per game in games that he started. And in terms of the fantasy totals, he's been over 25 fantasy points 5 times this season and in each of his last 3 games, one of which was against a pretty tough NC State defense that I think is one of the better defenses in the ACC in all of college football. And he's, using that legs to get you a lot of fantasy points. He's had 50 yards rushing or more in 4 of the last 5 games. So I think there's a lot to like about Kyron Drones in a game that they're projected to score 27 points. I think Drones has definitely got 3+ touchdown upside in this game. Now, at the running back position, Tulane does have their starting running back. It is Mekhi Hughes. He has been a big-time workhorse throughout the season, even though they will sprinkle in touchdowns or touches for Clayton Johnson as well as Shedro Lewis. But Mekhi Hughes is the workhorse. Don't get that twisted. I just don't think it's the best matchup against this Virginia Tech defense, as with them only being implied to score 17 points and with them having all the opt-outs and not the quarterback play that they're used to. I don't know if this is a great spot for Mekhi Hughes, but you do know that the workload is going to be there. That would be the one kind of redeeming factor in playing him in DFS, is that he's going to get a pretty massive workload. On the Virginia Tech side, they've also got a workhorse running back, and it is the NCAA transfer Bashal Tutin. He's been the workhorse all season long. Now, when you look at his game log, it's been pretty straightforward. Against good defenses, he doesn't do so well. Negative fantasy points against NC State, 9 fantasy points against Louisville. When he plays bad defenses, he's pretty doggone good. In his last 3 games against mediocre to bad defenses, 23 fantasy points against Syracuse, about 26 fantasy points against Boston College, about 28 fantasy points against Virginia. So this Tulane defense, I would classify as a good defense when they are committed and healthy and actively trying to win. But I don't know if that Tulane defense is going to show up here for this one. So I think that with Virginia Tech being implied to score 27 points, if you're not getting a piece of that offense by playing Kyron Drones, I could definitely see playing Bashal Tutin. He's got multiple touchdown upside. Now, the passing game is pretty straightforward in this one. Tulane has their top 3 receivers all out for this bowl game. Lawrence Keys, Jaquan Jackson, as well as I believe Chris is his first name. Yeah, Chris Brazel the second. So all 3 of those guys are out. The listed starters for this bowl game are all relatively unproven. It is Keith Brown, Bryce Bohannon, and Dante Fleming that are listed as the 3 starters. The only one that really kind of did anything in this season is Keith Brown. He came in the SMU game, had 5 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown, and that was a game that I believe they were missing 2 of their normal 3 wide receivers. So Brown might be the guy that you would want to play, but the downside is you don't know what they're getting at quarterback. It's going to be not Michael Pratt. It's going to be a backup. So with the kind of decreasing quarterback play, even though these guys are very cheap and they're going to be out there on the field, I don't know how reliable they are as plays just because you don't know what you're going to be getting out of the quarterback position. Now, on the Virginia Tech side, they didn't lose a whole lot in the portal. And at the wide receiver position, they're going to be starting Felton, Lane, and Steven Gosnell. Felton is the guy who had a really productive last month of the season. 17 fantasy points in 3 straight, 27 and 31 in his last 2. He's kind of been the guy for Kyron Drones over the last month. He's a guy that if you were planning on stacking Kyron Drones, he is the guy that I would stack him with, simply because he's had that best connection. He's been the best one there at this position. With Kyron Drones, though, with as mobile as he is and how much fantasy points he can get with his legs, I do think you can play him unstacked, and I don't think you necessarily have to lock him into a stacking partner. Virginia Tech did have some tight ends hit the portal, and Benji Gosnell, the brother of Steven, they actually went to a high school that's about 30 minutes from my house, so I am aware of that. They played in the air raid offense in high school, and they put up a lot of numbers. Anyway, Benji Gosnell is the tight end. This team uses the tight end position quite a bit. I would have preferred to see him stay at a cheaper salary than $4,000 on DraftKings, but he is the guy that is going to be getting those snaps and getting some potential looks if you're looking to really mega stack this Virginia Tech offense. All right, so let's transition on over into one of the best bowl sponsors, in my opinion, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, taking place in Charlotte, North Carolina, between North Carolina and West Virginia. The line in this one is currently West Virginia -6.5, with a total of 54.5, meaning that the implied total is about 30 to 24 in favor of West Virginia. Look, this line would not be this if North Carolina had all of their players. I think North Carolina is a better team than West Virginia, but the team that they're bringing to the bowl game is not better than West Virginia. So how how can we attack this from a DFS perspective? Well, North Carolina is going to be without a lot of guys on defense, and so that's going to make these West Virginia guys pretty darn appealing. At the quarterback position, I think that Garrett Green of West Virginia is objectively the best quarterback play on the slate. He averages over 3 times value for his salary. We've talked about all season long in college football. If you want a min cash in a GPP, or if you want to cash in a double up, 3 times the value for the salary is pretty much about what you want at least from every player. So $9,000, you want 27 fantasy points from Garrett Green, and he averages over that. That's a pretty doggone good sign, and he's shown a lot of upside as well. He has 3 games over 40 fantasy points on the season, and he does it a lot with his legs. He averages double-digit carries per game, and we have seen dual-threat quarterbacks give North Carolina issues here late in the season. Brandon Armstrong of NC State had 28 fantasy points against them. Haynes King of Georgia Tech had 35 fantasy points against him. So I think Garrett Green objectively is the best quarterback play on the slate. Even at his high salary, he's got upside for legitimately 40-plus fantasy points. Now, on the North Carolina side, Drake May is out for the game. The guy that I thought they would end up starting was going to be Jefferson Boaz. He was actually a high school teammate of the Gosnell brothers that I was just mentioning. Interesting story. He's about 6'8", and when he throws at a downward trajectory. It's really interesting to see. But anyway, he is not starting. He is in the portal as well as Drake May opting out for the draft. So the starter is going to be Connor Harrell, who played a little bit in blowouts this season, but didn't really do a whole lot. I don't really know enough about him to kind of rate his game, if I'm being totally honest. But what we do know is that this Carolina offense has been super lucrative for the quarterback position over the last 4 or 5 seasons, dating back to when Sam Howell was there. Drake May averaged well over 25 fantasy points per game. He averaged 29 fantasy points per game. And the reason why I picked 25 is because 25 would be about 3 times value for Connor Harrell. And Drake May was able to get 25 fantasy points in 9 out of 12 games. So Connor Harrell, obviously not Drake May, but if he's able to kind of have the same level of production that Drake May did, then he can very easily hit value for his salary. I think he's a little expensive on DraftKings for my taste. I think he's a little more palatable to play on FanDuel, however. Now, at the running back position, West Virginia's normal starter, C.J. Donaldson, is out for this game with injury. And he actually was active the last 2 weeks of the season, but he did not play a full-time role. And what you saw was the freshman Jaheim White playing a lot of snaps, and he looked great. He is electric with the ball in his hands. He had a rushing touchdown in one of those games and a receiving touchdown in both those games. Good for 26 and 43 fantasy points in those last 2 games. I would expect him to be very popular on this slate, and I would expect him to be very good in terms of a play on this slate. He's $5,800. North Carolina is not a great running defense, and he appears to have the backfield all to himself with C.J. Donaldson being out. I think if I'm not playing Garrett Green, I'm going to be playing Jaheim White, and I think that you can even play the both of them together because West Virginia loves to run the football, and Carolina is not a bad matchup for teams that love to run the football. They give up 4.3 yards per carry on the season, which is pretty juicy. So Jaheim White is a great play here on this Wednesday slate. Now on the UNC side, they actually have an even better matchup. West Virginia gives up 4.7 yards per carry on the season, and they have a workhorse running back in Amarian Hampton, who before the NC State game to end the season had 4 straight games of over 30 fantasy points. They just give this guy the ball a lot, and he breaks off long runs. He scores touchdowns. He's really good, and I think you can kind of throw away that NC State game as being just a game against a really good defense that was playing really good football. And I really think Amarian Hampton is a guy that has a very high ceiling. I think if you're looking to stack this game up, personally, if I'm trying to play a game stack of this game, I would probably go with Garrett Green at quarterback and Amarian Hampton at running back, and probably another option as a second quarterback as opposed to Connor Harrell. I think it is more likely that Amarian Hampton has a big game than Connor Harrell has a big game, in my personal opinion. Now, at the wide receiver position, this is where this game gets a little bit hazy. So on the West Virginia side, first off, I do want to get this out of the way. Garrett Green can be played unstacked because he runs the ball so much and he gets so much of his fantasy points from running that you don't necessarily have a wide receiver hit value with him when he has a big game. Now, over the course of the season, there have been 3 receivers that have been kind of utilized. Hudson Clement has been kind of the better one, in my opinion, when he's been healthy and actually finished games. Devin Carter is the other one who's a little bit more expensive. And then you've got Cole Taylor, the tight end. And look, I got to be honest, there's not really a whole lot outside of those 3 that is really ridiculous redeeming in my opinion. And those three would be the three that I would stick with. But I don't even think they're great plays at that. And I think Green can absolutely be played unstacked with no wide receiver on the same team. Now, on the UNC side, they are down a lot of guys. They are actually down 5 of their top 7 receivers for this season. They are out Tez Walker, Kobe Paysor, and their top 3 tight ends for this game. Now, Nate McCollum is projecting to be the wide receiver 1 for this game. He did not play in Carolina's last game against NC State, but he is apparently supposed to play in the bowl game. And that's a really good sign. He was really good before Tez Walker got his waiver eligible. He had a 40 fantasy point performance against Minnesota, a 23 fantasy point performance against Syracuse. So Nate McCollum absolutely does have some upside. If he does end up playing in this game. J.J. Jones had kind of been the wide receiver 2 down the stretch of the season behind Tez Walker, so I think he's interesting as well. Now, the other guys that are going to start for Carolina, Gavin Blackwell is a true sophomore who played a little bit at the start of the season, and then once Tez Walker got eligible, they just shifted him right to the bench. But now that Tez Walker is out, as well as Kobe Paysor, that should mean some snaps for Gavin Blackwell. And then Deems May is going to be the guy that starts at tight end. Kind of the same way with Benji Gosnell with Virginia Tech. I kind of like the fact that you can play a tight end for this team with all the other guys gone. But the downside is they priced him up to $4,000. I would rather have him sitting there at $3,000 even, which would be what his salary should be based off of what he's done during the season. So that is what you're looking at for Carolina and Virginia. And that is kind of how I would approach that game from a DFS perspective. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's talk about the later 2 games of the day. All right, so before we dive into the Holiday Bowl, I do want to mention there are some places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter, aka X, at Mike's Money Picks. I've been a little bit lax lately because just life is kind of crazy when you have a 4-month-old and it's Christmas season. But I do my best to tweet out the DFS rundown where I go over my categorical plays for each DFS slate, as well as any updates to the show, whether they're on YouTube, audio, whatever. And then if there's any ever injuries that needs to kind of update my thoughts on players, I do try to get those out there as well. So just give me a follow on there. I'm also more than happy to answer any start-sit questions you may have at Mike's Money Picks on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. We've got a lot of smart people in there who play a lot of DFS for a lot of different sports. And recently the discussion for college basketball, NFL, NBA, and college football have all been fantastic. There's a lot of guys in there that have helped me get better at NBA, which is not one of my stronger sports. And if you're looking for people to bounce ideas off of, kind of strategize your picks and then just kind of tilt and sweat together, it's a lot of fun. I do recommend it if you're looking for more people to talk about DFS with. Lastly, you can also get full articles from me on my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. I write a full article for every college football and college basketball DFS slate where I profile my core plays as well as my lineup strategy and attack strategy for the slate. There are not a whole lot of people that write about college football and college basketball DFS. So if you're looking to get some more on that, the Patreon is the place that you can go from that. I'm not going to sit here and guarantee that you're just going to log in and immediately have, GPP winning lineups from that. But I think that you can read it, get yourself some good information, and kind of get yourself a lot of ideas to help put your lineups together from what I can offer you in terms of the information. And lastly, if you're looking to try something new this season, January 1st, I know some states are changing some laws around. So if you're looking to, sign up for an online sports book or a player prop site or a DFS site, head on over to signupexpert.com/Mike'sPicks. We are partnered with SignUpExpert, and what they do is they get you the best offers and promo codes for any DFS player prop or sportsbook site for new users. And it will even sync to your location for what is legal in your state or province. So if you're looking to try something new, give SignUpExpert a shot. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about these last 2 games now. So the Holiday Bowl between Louisville and USC. So if you've ever heard the phrase, an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, this is like the opposite of that. Currently, we've got an offense in Louisville that has been so constipated and looked so bad over the last month that they don't look like they can score on anybody. And you've got a USC defense that literally will let anybody score on them because they're one of the worst defenses in all college football. So I don't know what to make of this game. Vegas of this game, though, they have decided to make it Louisville as a 7-point favorite in a total of 58.5, which is the highest point total of the day, with an implied score of 33-26 in favor of Louisville, which makes Louisville the highest implied team total of the day. Now, from a DFS perspective, On DraftKings, on FanDuel, I think he is very fairly priced. But on DraftKings, I think Jack Plummer is the most overpriced player on this entire slate and probably in all of bowl season. He is priced for his ceiling, not for what he has done lately. He's only been over 18 fantasy points 3 times all season long. And really, it's just been ugly in those other 9 games. Like, he has not done a whole lot over the last 2 months of the season. The only good news is that those 3 games where he got over 18 fantasy points were all 26 fantasy points or more for the performance. So he does have a legitimately high ceiling, and he is playing against one of the worst defenses in all of college football. But I just don't really know if I want to pay $8,900 for Jack Plummer when Garrett Green is sitting right there and has been a lot better over the last 2 months of the season. My main interest in Jack Plummer would probably be in a game stack, because if you look at the ways that he's had his ceiling games, those 3 games where he had over 26 fantasy points, well, they've been games where the other team has scored 28 or more points against Louisville. So if this game does turn into a shootout, Jack Plummer might be worth a play. So I would probably be mainly interested in him as a game stacking option. So who is the USC quarterback that we can game stack with? Well, Caleb Williams is in the draft for obvious reasons, and Miller Moss is going to be the starter for this game. We don't really know how good he is, but we do know is that the Lincoln Riley system is one of the most lucrative offensive systems for quarterbacks in all of college football. Caleb Williams averaged about 30 fantasy points per game this season, and so if Miller Moss is able to do that, then he's going to have one heck of a performance, right? But I just don't really know what to expect from him. Again, I think my main interest in Moss, along with Plummer, would be as a game stack, and let me just play the both of them and hope and pray that this game ends up being a shootout. And I think that might be the path to success for playing these guys, because I think as one-off plays, I think there's definitely some big-time question marks at the price tags that they are at. Now, at the running back position, for Louisville, they are without their lead back, Jawar Jordan, who is headed to the NFL draft. And I get it. He's a really good player, and he's a home run hitter. He breaks off a lot of long runs. So what you're going to see is likely a committee between Isaac Guerendo and Maurice Turner. Guerendo has been better, but Turner has been a factor over the last 2 months of the season, so I'm not totally discounting him. But Guerendo has been pretty doggone good, and he's had 4 games this season, over 17 fantasy points as a backup to Jawar Jordan. So I think that there's legitimate upside for Isaac Guerendo, especially if he ends up getting more of the carries than we think he is. And USC is an elite matchup for running backs. They rank 105th in the country and surrender 4.8 yards per carry in the run game. Now, the Louisville defense is much more stout against the run. They only surrender 3.3 yards per carry, which ranks 19th in the nation. But what's intriguing about USC is that they've been a 2-man committee all season long with Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones. And Marshawn Lloyd is not expected to play in this game. So Austin Jones appears to be the guy and could be in line for the full workload. And what's interesting is that if you just add up Marshawn Lloyd plus Austin Jones' fantasy points this season, you get about 25 fantasy points per game. And so if Austin Jones does end up with the full workload, there's a case to be made that he is one of the best running back plays on the slate. And with all the other transfers that USC has, I kind of think you could see a big-time workload for Austin Jones in this bowl game. Now, the wide receiver position is really, really, this is going to be fun. So Louisville, let's break them down first. The Jeff Brom offense, when he came over from Purdue, is an offense that loves to feed the wide receiver one. When he was at Purdue, you had Rondale Moore, you had Charlie Jones, you had David Bell. There's all these guys that just got fed as the number one wide receiver. So for Louisville this year, it has been Jamari Thrash who has been fed as the number one wide receiver. Well, Jamari Thrash is currently headed to the NFL draft. And so we do not know who the number one wide receiver that's going to get fed is going to be. And there's a lot of wide receivers that are going to play snaps. Louisville played a wide receiver rotation before Jamari Thrash declared for the draft. So it's going to be a rotation now, even with him in the draft. And it's going to be really hard to predict who is going to be the guy that breaks out. So who are the possibilities of the guys that can break out? Well, there is Chris Bell, Jimmy Callaway, Kevin Coleman, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Jaden Thompson, and then there's the tight end Joey Gatewood. They've all been priced up a little bit on DraftKings to make them very difficult to play with all the speculation going on between that rotation. What we do know is that recently, Amari Huggins-Bruce has been operating primarily as the slot. I don't think that's the role that you really look for this wide receiver one in this offense. The most likely to have a big game would be Jimmy Callaway, in my opinion. He's kind of been the best or shown the highest ceiling over the last 2 months of the season. And then you also have Jaden Thompson, who on Louisville's official depth chart at the start of the season was listed as Thrash's backup. So, some college offenses do this thing where they only have this receiver play the X position and this receiver play the Z position. And so if it turns into that, then Jaden Thompson would be the guy that would be in Jamari Thrash's spot. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty here. And so if you just want to avoid the uncertainty, just don't play it. I think that's totally a viable option. Now, on the USC side, we have lamented all season long how USC was a super spread out wide receiving core, and they played a lot of different guys, and a lot of different guys had a lot of different levels of production, and it was really hard to predict week in and week out, and they were always expensive. Well, the good news is for the bowl game, a lot of those guys left. And so what we're left with is a pretty condensed 3-receiver set for USC between Taj Washington, who is apparently heading to the draft but is playing in the bowl game. I think he's trying to improve his draft stock. And then you've got the freshman Zachariah Branch, and then you've got the Arizona transfer Dorian Singer playing in this game as well. That is going to be your 3-receiver set for USC. I kind of like all of them in different ways. Washington has been the best receiver for USC this season, and he is a big play threat. Zachariah Branch is a guy who is going to get scheme touches because he is very fast, and he's a very bright future for the USC Trojans. So I think he will be a guy that is going to get the football in his hands. And then Singer is a guy that when he was at Arizona had a ton of volume, and he just hasn't gotten that volume because he hasn't really been a full-time player for USC. So I think they all three have upside in their own different ways. I would be most likely to stack Washington with Miller Moss, and I would be most likely to play Zachariah Branch as a one-off just because I think there's a chance that he could, get a rushing touchdown or a return touchdown or, just break off one big play that doesn't really help the quarterback out all that much. All right, the last bowl game of the day is going to be the Texas Bowl, Texas A&M and Oklahoma State. Now, before we get started with this one, I do want to mention, if you like what you're seeing on YouTube, please hit the like button. It really does help me out a lot. And in the comment section, tell me who you are playing at the quarterback position here on this slate. I think there's a lot of different options, and I think it's really interesting to see who do you guys think is going to be the best quarterback play for this slate? So let me know in the comments. Let's get some discussion going there. Now, let's go ahead and break this game down. So this game is a decently high total. It's Oklahoma State minus 2.5 according to Vegas. The total is 54.5, meaning the implied total is about 28 to 26 in favor of Oklahoma State. Texas A&M is playing without their head coach, Jimbo Fisher. They are also having a lot of guys who opted out of the bowl game. There's apparently only like 50 to 55 scholarship players left for Texas A&M, which is not a lot. And so in this game, you're seeing basically a skeleton crew of Texas A&M playing in it, but it is most of their key players. Jaden Henderson has been the guy that started at quarterback. He played each of the last 3 games. He had at least 19 fantasy points in all 3 of those starts. He had at least 12 rushing attempts in all 3 of those starts. In Oklahoma State's defense has not been good. They've given up 30 points or more in 4 straight games. So I think that makes a really good case for Jalen Henderson to be a pretty good play at the quarterback position, especially considering he's coming in as one of the cheaper starting quarterbacks here on this slate. Alan Bowman is the starter for Oklahoma State. And I got to be honest, I'm not really interested in him outside of game stacks. Oklahoma State is a heavy rushing team, and Alan Bowman's upside has kind of been capped throughout the season because of that. He started 10 games, and he's been over 20 fantasy points in 5 of them, but he hasn't really had a ceiling game over 25 fantasy points. So the low ceiling does kind of, keep me kind of a little bit off of Alan Bowman, even though the price tag does make him appealing. Now, in all 5 of those games where Alan Bowman did score more than 20 fantasy points, there were more than 60 real points scored in that game. So I do think he could be a game stacking piece or a game stacking option if you're looking to play Jalen Henderson on the other side. Now, at the running back position, Ollie Gordon for Oklahoma State is back, and he is coming back next year. He's had 2 real dud games over the course of the season, but other than that, he's been the best running back in all of DFS college football for pretty much the last 3 months. Now, I would attribute the last 2 dud games for him as kind of being game script dependent. Against Texas, they went down real early. Texas has an elite front 7. They really stuffed the box and made Oklahoma State try to beat him through the air. UCF, he got benched for a fumble early in the game, and before we knew it, they were down 21-0, and they were just throwing the rest of the game. So Ollie Gordon, I think he's an elite play, but I do think he comes with a lot of opportunity cost at a salary of $9,500. But he is probably ignoring cost, he's the best running back on the play, and he's the best overall player on the slate, in my opinion, ignoring cost. But that salary, man, that's a lot to pay for. And I think if you do pay for it, you got to really have hopes that he's going to break off some long touchdown runs. Now, for Texas A&M, Le'Veon Moss was the workhorse back before he got injured at the early part of November. And he kind of really hasn't gotten that role back. It's been a committee with him and Amari Daniels as well as Reuben Owens. All three of these guys are expected to play in this game. I don't really know what to expect from the running back position, but if Le'Veon Moss is fully healthy, it would stand to reason that he would be the workhorse back. And Oklahoma State does surrender 4.7 yards per carry. So 4.7 yards per carry, that's not really all that good. So Le'Veon Moss, if he does get a workload, could have a little bit of upside. Now, at the wide receiver position, Texas A&M is an interesting one because you got Evan Stewart, who is in the portal. You got Aeneas Smith, who is in the draft. Noah Thomas is reportedly unavailable for this game, and he's not playing either. It leaves like 3 scholarship wide receivers in this game. And really, the guys that are left are not exactly the most proven guys in the world. You've got Ja'Day Walker, who's been decent in the last month. He's had 3 of his last 4 games over 12 fantasy points. And then you've got Moose Muhammad, who is apparently still active for this game. I haven't read anything that indicates that he is out. He's a guy who's shown some upside over the last 2 seasons. Really good physical wide receiver, son of Moose and Muhammad. So if those are the only 2 guys left, and you're playing Jaden Henderson, they're really cheap stacking options. And I think that you got to consider them if you are playing the A&M quarterback. Those are the 2 guys that I would be looking for. Now, for Oklahoma State, they've been pretty darn consistent over the last month of the season with their receivers. It's Brennan Presley, it's Leon Johnson, it's Reuben Owens. They operate at a very fast tempo, so even though they are a primarily run team with Ollie Gordon, these guys are all still going to get looks. Presley has been the alpha this year, and he's been really, really solid. He's had over 9 catches in 3 straight games. Leon Johnson didn't do much against Texas, but he was really solid before that over the last month. And then Reuben Owens is a guy that is a possession receiver, sees a lot of targets, and a lot of them come in the end zone as well. So again, if you're looking to stack up this game, there are very 3 consistent options for the Oklahoma State passing attack that I think that you would probably want to get at least 1 or 2 of them if you are stacking this Oklahoma State offense, because those are the 3 that we know are going to be out there, and we know that they have a chance to do some work and have a good performance. All right, that does it for this 4-game slate, and that does it for this episode. So remember, if you like what you saw, hit the like button on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. It helps me out a lot. It helps the videos, helps the podcast get noticed and pop up in searches. It helps us grow the community, and I really do appreciate it. You guys are the best. Lastly, if you want more from me, remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. You can join the Fantasy Corner Discord. You can also get the full articles available on the Patreon. And I will be back for the rest of bowl season. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the audio feed as well. So that way you can get these episodes when they drop, because we're going to be coming your way for every day the rest of bowl season, as well as our college basketball content, golf content, and NFL content as well. So to get all that, hit that subscribe button and just make sure you get those notifications when those episodes drop. All right, that does it for this episode, y'all. So hopefully we were able to give you guys some good information. It's going to help you build some DFS lineups for this 4-game slate. Hopefully we're able to give you guys some accurate information, at least as accurate as I have it here, sit and record this on a Tuesday night for a lot of these transfer portals and a lot of these opt-out guys. So hopefully I was able to give you guys the goods on that, so that way you guys can build some winners tomorrow. Thank you guys for listening and watching to this point. Best of luck to you in all your DFS endeavors. Best of luck tomorrow in this slate. So thank you guys, and I will see you next time.